The frozen ground crunched under Private Marcus Webb's boots as he shifted in the foxhole. December wind cut through his uniform like a knife. Belgium had never felt colder. He pulled his coat tighter and watched his breath turn into white clouds in the air. Marcus was 22 years old, but looked older. 3 months of war did that to a man. His hands were rough and red from the cold. His face had dirt smudged across it, but his eyes were sharp, always watching, always calculating. Next to him sat their anti-tank gun, a 57mm cannon that had seen better days. The metal was scratched and dented. The barrel had fired so many rounds that Marcus wondered when it would finally give up. But it was all they had. "Another quiet day in paradise," said Tommy Richardson. Everyone called him Specs because of his thick glasses. He was the loader responsible for putting shells into the gun. Right now, he was reading a crumpled tank manual he had found in an abandoned truck. Sergeant Bill Hawkins sat on the other side of the foxhole. He was 40 years old, which made him ancient by Army standards. He had fought in North Africa before coming to Europe. His face showed every battle. He smoked a cigarette and stared at nothing. "Stop reading that junk, Specs," Hawkins said. "We ain't gonna see any tanks here. Germans are hitting the northern sectors. We're forgotten." The fourth member of their crew was Johnny Martinez. He was the spotter, the one with the binoculars. His job was to find targets. But his hands always shook a little. Not from fear exactly, just nerves. He had been like that since Normandy. It was December 16th, 1944. The Battle of the Bulge had started that morning. Hitler had launched a massive surprise attack through the Ardennes forest. Thousands of German soldiers and hundreds of tanks were pushing through the American lines. The goal was to reach the Belgian port of Antwerp and cut the Allied forces in half. But Marcus and his crew were miles away from the main fighting. They sat in a small foxhole outside a village called Rochrath. Their orders were simple: guard the road, watch for German patrols, report anything unusual. Nothing had been unusual for 2 weeks. Marcus came from Montana. His father had been a hunter and taught him to track elk through the mountains. Marcus learned to read the land like other people read books. He could tell where animals would go just by looking at the terrain. He understood wind and distance and how sunlight changed everything. The Army had made him a gunner because he could shoot straight. But Marcus was different from other gunners. He did not just follow the manual. He studied everything around him. For 2 weeks, he had been watching this valley. He knew every tree, every rock, every shadow that moved when the wind blew. "Something's wrong," Marcus said suddenly. Hawkins looked at him. "What?" Martinez checked the valley pass, the narrow section about a mile east. Martinez raised his binoculars. His hands shook as he adjusted the focus. He looked for a long time. Then he went very still. "I see tracks," Martinez said quietly. "Fresh tracks in the snow. Tank tracks." Hawkins grabbed the binoculars. He looked for himself. His cigarette fell from his lips. "Could be ours," Specs said hopefully. "Maybe American tanks moving into position." Marcus shook his head. American tanks would use the main road. These tracks are coming from the east, from German territory. And look at the pattern. They're in formation, military formation. Hawkins lowered the binoculars. His face had gone pale. "We need to report this." He reached for their radio. It crackled with static. He tried different frequencies. Nothing but noise. The radio had been unreliable for days. Now, it was completely dead. "We're on our own," Hawkins said. The sun was setting. Orange light spread across the snow. Marcus kept watching the valley. That narrow pass where the tracks led. He had studied that spot for days. The ground there was softer. Hidden beneath the snow was partially frozen mud. Heavy vehicles would slow down there. They would have to bunch up to get through. "They'll come at dawn," Marcus said. "Who will?" Specs asked. "Whoever made those tracks. They're moving at night to avoid Allied planes. But they'll need daylight to navigate through the pass. They'll come at dawn." Hawkins stared at Marcus. "How do you know that?" "Because that's what I would do." The temperature dropped as night fell. The 4 men took turns on watch. Marcus took first shift. He did not sleep during his off time. Instead, he sat with his notebook. He had been drawing in it for weeks. Maps of the valley, notes about angles and distances, calculations about where the morning sun would be. Specs looked over his shoulder. What are you doing? Planning, Marcus said. Planning what? Marcus did not answer. He just kept drawing to 8:03 in the morning. They all heard it. A sound in the distance, low and rumbling, like thunder that would not stop. It came from the east, from the direction of the tank tracks. Martinez pressed his ear to the frozen ground, an old trick for hearing vehicles at long distance. His face went white. Engines, he whispered. Lots of them. Hawkins checked his watch. Still 3 hours until dawn. They're staging, Marcus said, getting into position. They'll move forward when the sun comes up. How many? Specs asked. Marcus listened to the rumble. He had heard tank engines before. He knew the sound of a Panzer column on the move. This was not a patrol. This was not a small unit. At least a dozen, Marcus said. Maybe more. The 4 men sat in silence. They all knew what that meant. A full German armored column was heading their way. Behind them was the village of Roshrath. In that village were supply trucks, medical stations, and hundreds of American soldiers who had no idea what was coming. We need to fall back, Hawkins said. Warn the village. No time, Marcus said. By the time we reach them and they organize a defense, the German tanks will already be through the pass. Then what do we do? Martinez asked. Marcus looked at their small gun. Then he looked at the valley, at that narrow pass where the ground was soft and the morning sun would create a blinding glare. He thought about everything he had learned from hunting in Montana, about patience, about knowing the terrain better than your target, about waiting for exactly the right moment. We stopped them here, Marcus said. Hawkins laughed. It was not a happy sound. Stop them? Stop a Panzer column? With one gun? You're crazy. Marcus did not argue. He just went back to his notebook, drawing, calculating, planning something that no military manual would ever teach. Dawn was 3 hours away. The sky turned from black to gray. Dawn was coming. Marcus Webb had not slept. None of them had. They sat in their foxhole and listened to the rumbling engines in the distance. The sound grew louder with each passing minute. They're moving, Martinez whispered. His binoculars were frozen to his face. He had been watching the valley pass for an hour. Specs loaded a shell into the gun. His hand shook worse than usual. This is insane. We should run. Run where? Hawkins asked. He had chain-smoked through the night. Now he was on his last cigarette. They'll overrun the village in minutes. Then they'll overrun us while we're running. Marcus ignored them. He was positioning the gun at an odd angle, not pointing straight at the valley pass like normal. Instead, he aimed it slightly to the left, toward a spot that seemed random. What are you doing? Hawkins asked. Trust me, Marcus said. The sun broke over the horizon. Golden light spread across the snow, and then they saw it. The German column. First came the reconnaissance vehicles, small armored cars moving fast. Behind them came the tanks, massive steel beasts that made the ground shake. Marcus counted them through his field glasses. Panther tanks, Tiger tanks, Panzer IVs, 12 in total. Maybe more behind them hidden in the tree line. Behind the tanks came half-tracks full of infantry, trucks carrying supplies. This was not a patrol. This was a full armored battle group. Probably 200 men and enough firepower to destroy an entire American battalion. The column moved with confidence. They clearly believed this area was undefended. In the Battle of the Bulge, German intelligence had been excellent. They knew where the weak points were in the American lines. This valley pass was supposed to be one of those weak points. They were right. It was defended by 4 men and 1 damaged gun. Mother of God, Specs said quietly. The lead tank was a Panther. 50 tons of armor and a gun that could destroy any American tank from a mile away. Its engine roared as it approached the narrow section of the pass. Just like Marcus predicted, it slowed down. The ground there was softer. The driver had to be careful. Behind the Panther, the other tanks bunched up. The pass was only wide enough for 2 tanks side by side. They had to form a line, a traffic jam of death machines. That's the bottleneck, Marcus said. That's where we hit them. Hawkins stared at him. Hit them? We got 1 gun. They got 12 tanks. We don't need to destroy all of them. We just need to block the pass. You're insane. Probably. Marcus pressed his eye to the gun sight. Then he moved away from it. Instead, he pulled out a piece of broken mirror glass. He held it up to catch the sun's reflection. What are you doing? Specs asked. The gun sight is calibrated for standard range and angle. But I'm not shooting standard. I'm shooting for weak points. For that, I need to see the sun angle. This was not in any manual. Marcus was using techniques he learned hunting deer. You did not just aim at the animal. You thought about wind, about light, about how your target would move. His father had taught him that a good hunter was patient. A good hunter understood the environment better than the prey. The panther entered the killing zone. 800 yards away, Marcus studied it through the mirror glass. He was looking for something specific. The gap, he muttered. Where's the gap? What gap? Hawkins asked. Between the turret and the hull. Every tank has it. It's a weak point. The armor there is thinner. Specs remembered something. He grabbed his tank manual, the one he had been reading for weeks. Here, page 47. Panther tank specifications. The turret ring is vulnerable to high-angle shots. Marcus smiled. Specs, you beautiful nerd. I don't see how that helps us, Martinez said. We can't get a high angle from down here. We don't need height. We need precision. Marcus adjusted the gun one more degree. The shell will hit at an angle if we time it right. The Panther is moving slow through the soft ground. When it hits the exact center of the bottleneck, it will dip forward slightly. The front will go down. The turret gap will be exposed for exactly 2 seconds. This is impossible, Hawkins said. Probably, Marcus said again. The Panther moved forward. Slow, steady. Marcus watched it through the mirror glass. He was calculating in his head. Distance, speed, wind direction. The morning sun was directly behind their position. That meant the Germans would be partially blinded if they looked toward the gun flash. The Panther reached the center of the bottleneck. Its front end dipped down slightly as the treads sank into the softer ground. Now, Marcus whispered. He fired. The gun roared. The shell flew across 800 yards in less than 2 seconds. It hit the Panther exactly where Marcus aimed, right in the gap between turret and hull. The shell penetrated the thinner armor. Inside the tank, ammunition exploded. The Panther erupted in flames. Black smoke poured from every hatch. The commander tried to escape, but the fire was too fast. The tank died in the middle of the pass, blocking the way forward. You did it, Specs shouted. You actually did it. Load, Marcus barked. We got 3 minutes before they figure out where we are. The German column stopped in confusion. The tanks behind the burning Panther tried to reverse, but there were more tanks behind them. They collided with each other. Engines roared. Commanders shouted orders. Nobody knew where the shot came from. Marcus was already aiming at the next target, not the tank behind the Panther. That would be expected. Instead, he aimed at the middle of the column, at a Tiger tank with extra antennas on top. That's the command tank, Marcus said. Kill that, and they lose coordination. How do you know it's the command tank? Hawkins asked. Extra antennas mean extra radios. Extra radios mean commander. Marcus fired again. This shot was even harder. The Tiger was 900 yards away and partially hidden behind other tanks. But Marcus had calculated the angle. The shell arced over a Panzer IV and struck the Tiger's side armor. Not a killing blow, but enough to damage the radio equipment and kill the commander inside. The German column descended into chaos. Without their commander, different tanks tried different things. Some tried to turn around in the narrow pass. Some tried to push forward. They crashed into each other. Treads locked. Engines stalled. They're sitting ducks. Martinez shouted. Marcus fired again. And again. Each shot was calculated perfectly. He aimed for treads to immobilize tanks. He aimed for engine compartments to start fires. He never aimed where the Germans expected. In 4 minutes, 7 tanks were destroyed or disabled. The valley pass was completely blocked. German infantry jumped from their half-tracks and scattered. Some ran forward trying to find whoever was shooting. Some ran backward in panic. But then the Germans figured it out. An officer spotted the muzzle flash from Marcus's gun. He pointed, shouted orders. The remaining German tanks turned their turrets toward the American position. We're spotted, Hawkins yelled. We need to move. Mortar rounds began falling around their foxhole. The Germans were ranging their position. The next volley would be right on target. Marcus fired one more shot. Then he grabbed Specs. Run. Now. They abandoned the gun and sprinted toward the village. Behind them, German mortars obliterated their foxhole. Their gun exploded under the bombardment. But in the Valley Pass, 12 German tanks sat burning or immobilized. The German advance through this sector had been stopped by 4 men and 1 gun. For now, Marcus Webb ran through the snow with his crew. Behind them, explosions tore apart their old position. German mortars screamed through the air. Each blast threw frozen dirt and snow into the sky. The village. Hawkins gasped. He was older and slower than the others. We need to warn them. They reached the first buildings of Roshrath just as the sun climbed higher in the sky. The village was small, maybe 20 buildings. Most were damaged from earlier fighting. American soldiers used them as shelter and supplied depots that a young lieutenant saw them running. His name was Crawford. He looked fresh from training. This was probably his first week in combat. What's happening? Crawford asked. German armor. Marcus shouted. Full Panzer column in the Valley Pass. Maybe 200 men. Crawford's face went white. How many tanks? 12. We disabled 7, but 5 are still operational. Plus infantry with Panzerfausts. Panzerfausts were German anti-tank rockets. 1 man could carry one. 1 shot could destroy an American tank. They were cheap and deadly. The Germans gave them to regular infantry soldiers. 7 tanks. Crawford repeated. How did you destroy 7 tanks? Later, Hawkins yelled. We need to set up defensive positions now. They'll be coming through that pass in minutes. But Marcus was not listening. He was looking back at the valley, watching the smoke rise from the burning German tanks. Something was wrong. The Germans should have cleared the pass by now. 5 working tanks could push the damaged ones aside. But they were not moving. They're stuck, Marcus said quietly. What? Specs asked. The Germans. They're stuck in the pass. Look at the smoke pattern. It's not moving. They can't get through. Martinez understood first. The burning tanks are blocking the entire pass. And the soft ground means they can't go around. They're trapped. A slow smile spread across Marcus's face. We didn't just slow them down. We stopped them completely. For how long? Hawkins asked. Long enough. Marcus turned to Lieutenant Crawford. Sir, how many men do you have in this village? Maybe 80. Most are supply personnel. Only 20 combat soldiers. What about weapons? Standard rifles. 3 machine guns. No anti-tank weapons. We sent all our bazookas north to the main battle line. Marcus thought fast. The Battle of the Bulge was happening all across the Ardennes forest. American forces were stretched thin. Reinforcements were days away. If the Germans broke through here, they could attack Allied supply lines from behind. Thousands of American soldiers would be cut off. We need to hold them here, Marcus said. In the valley. Don't let them reach the village. Hold them with what? Crawford asked. We got rifles against tanks. The tanks are stuck. For now. But their infantry will advance on foot. That's what we need to stop. Hawkins pulled out a cigarette. His hands were shaking. Kid's right. If we let their infantry clear the pass, their tanks will follow. We need to keep them bottled up. Crawford made a decision. He started shouting orders. Combat soldiers grabbed their weapons. Supply personnel found rifles. Medics prepared for casualties. Within minutes, the Americans were setting up defensive positions on the outskirts of the village. Marcus studied the terrain between the village and the Valley Pass. About 600 yards of open, snow-covered ground. No cover. No concealment. Any German infantry crossing that space would be exposed. Machine guns here, here, and here. Marcus pointed to 3 positions. Overlapping fields of fire. Make them pay for every yard. You're not an officer, Crawford said. But he positioned the machine guns exactly where Marcus indicated. The Germans came an hour later. Marcus saw them through binoculars. Around 50 infantry soldiers advancing in a skirmish line. They moved carefully, using what little cover existed. These were experienced troops, probably veterans from the Eastern Front where they fought the Russians. Wait for my signal, Crawford ordered. His voice only shook a little. The Germans got within 400 yards. 300. 200. Now, Crawford shouted. The 3 American machine guns opened fire simultaneously. Tracers streaked across the snow. German soldiers fell. Others dove for cover behind small rises in the ground. They returned fire with rifles and machine pistols. The battle was brutal. Germans with Panzerfaust tried to get close enough to use them. American riflemen shot them down before they could fire. One Panzerfaust exploded when a bullet hit it. The German soldier carrying it simply disappeared in the blast. For 30 minutes, the fight raged across the open ground. The snow turned red in places. German bodies lay scattered across the field. But Americans were dying too. One machine gun position took a direct hit from a German rifle grenade. 2 men died instantly. "They're falling back," Martinez shouted. The Germans retreated to the Valley Pass. They had failed to break through. But Marcus knew this was just the first attempt. The Germans would try again and again until they either broke through or received orders to withdraw. "Casualties?" Crawford asked. 5 dead, 8 wounded. A medic reported the Americans had held, but at a cost. Then they heard a new sound, a rumbling from the valley, different from tank engines. This was higher-pitched, mechanical. "What is that?" Specs asked. Marcus raised his binoculars. His blood ran cold. "They're bringing up engineering equipment. Cranes, recovery vehicles. They're going to clear the pass." Hawkins understood immediately. How long? Few hours. Maybe less if they're efficient. Once the pass was clear, the German tanks would advance. 5 Panther and Tiger tanks against a village with no anti-tank weapons. It would be a massacre. Crawford looked at Marcus. "You stopped them once. Can you do it again?" "Our gun is destroyed," Marcus said. "We got nothing that can hurt a tank." "Then what do we do?" Marcus thought about his father's hunting lessons. When you could not attack the prey directly, you changed the environment. You used the terrain against them. You made their strength into weakness. "We don't fight the tanks," Marcus said slowly. "We fight their supply line." "What supply line?" Crawford asked. Marcus pointed toward the rear of the German column. Through the smoke and confusion, he could see vehicles staged behind the tanks. Trucks, half-tracks, supply carriers. "Tanks need fuel," Marcus said. "They need ammunition. All of that is in those trucks. If we destroy their supplies, the tanks become useless. They can't advance without fuel. How do we reach their supply vehicles?" Hawkins asked. "They're protected by their whole column." Marcus smiled. It was not a nice smile. "We don't go to them. We make them come to us." He explained his plan. It was crazy, probably suicidal, but it was the only chance they had. Lieutenant Crawford listened. His face was pale, but he was nodding. "Do it," Crawford said. "God help us all." Marcus Webb's plan was simple but dangerous. The German supply trucks were positioned at the rear of the column, about a mile from the village. They carried fuel, ammunition, food, and everything else the German battle group needed. Without those supplies, the tanks would be stuck even if they cleared the pass. The problem was getting to those trucks. The Germans had guards. They had cover, and they were expecting another American attack. "So we don't attack them," Marcus explained to the group of volunteers. 10 men had agreed to join him. All combat veterans. All crazy enough to try. "We circle around through the forest," Marcus continued. "Come at them from behind. From the east. That's German territory. They won't expect us from that direction." Hawkins cleaned his rifle. "And when we get there, we destroy everything we can. Focus on fuel trucks. They're the priority. One trace around into a fuel tank, and the whole truck goes up. Then we run like hell," Specs added. "Then we run like hell," Marcus agreed. Lieutenant Crawford watched from the side. He was staying behind to defend the village with the remaining men. "This is a suicide mission." "Probably," Marcus said. That word again. His favorite word lately. "But if we do nothing, those tanks will crush this village. Better to die trying than wait to die here." They left an hour before sunset. 11 men moving through the winter forest. The snow was deep. Each step was exhausting, but the forest cover kept them hidden from German observation. Martinez led the way. His shaking hands were steady now. Combat had that effect sometimes. The fear before battle was worse than the battle itself. Once the fighting started, training took over. Instinct replaced thought. They circled east for 3 miles, then turned south, then west again. a wide loop that brought them behind German lines. They moved slowly, carefully. German patrols were everywhere. Twice they had to hide, while enemy soldiers passed within yards. Night fell. The temperature dropped below freezing. Marcus's fingers were numb inside his gloves. He could barely feel his rifle, but he kept moving. They all did. 18 midnight. They reached a ridge overlooking the German position. Below them, maybe 300 yards away, was the rear of the German column. Supply trucks were parked in rows. Soldiers stood around fires, trying to stay warm. Officers shouted orders about clearing the pass. Nobody looked toward the forest behind them. "Count the fuel trucks," Marcus whispered. Specs counted. 5, maybe 6. Hard to tell in the dark. 6 fuel trucks can keep those tanks moving for days, Hawkins said. "We need to destroy all of them." "Split into 3 groups," Marcus ordered. "4 men per group. Hawkins, you take left side. Specs, you take right. I'll take center. Wait for my signal. Then light them up." They split up and moved into position. The waiting was the hardest part. Marcus lay in the snow and watched German soldiers below. They looked tired, cold, human. Not so different from American soldiers. Just men fighting a war they probably did not start. But they were here to kill Americans. And Marcus was here to stop them. He raised his rifle, aimed at the nearest fuel truck, checked the wind, checked the distance. Everything his father taught him about shooting in difficult conditions. Then he fired. The tracer round flew straight and true. It punched through the fuel tank. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the truck exploded. Flames shot 30 feet into the air. The blast knocked German soldiers off their feet. Immediately, the other Americans opened fire. More tracer rounds found more fuel trucks. Explosions ripped through the German supply area. Fire spread from vehicle to vehicle. Ammunition started cooking off, creating secondary explosions. The Germans panicked. They thought they were being attacked by a major American force. Officers shouted contradictory orders. Some soldiers ran toward the forest. Others ran toward the burning trucks, trying to save supplies. "Fall back," Marcus yelled. "Move, move, move." The 11 Americans melted into the forest. Behind them, the German supply area burned like a bonfire. Black smoke rose into the night sky. But the Germans recovered quickly. They were professional soldiers. They organized pursuit parties. Search teams with dogs and flashlights entered the forest. Marcus and his men ran through the darkness. Branches tore at their faces. Snow sucked at their boots. Behind them, German voices shouted. Dogs barked. Flashlight beams cut through the trees. "They're gaining," Martinez gasped. "Keep moving." Hawkins ordered that a German patrol appeared ahead of them. 5 men blocking their path. Both sides opened fire at the same time. Muzzle flashes lit up the forest. 2 Germans fell. 1 American went down with a bullet in his leg. "Leave me," the wounded man shouted. "No." Marcus grabbed him and hauled him up. Another American took the wounded man's other arm. They dragged him forward. More Germans appeared. The forest was full of them. The Americans were surrounded, trapped between multiple German patrols. "There," Specs pointed to a steep ravine. "We can lose them down there." They slid down the ravine. It was a 30-foot drop through ice and rocks. The wounded man screamed. Others broke bones, but they all made it to the bottom. The German patrols hesitated at the top of the ravine. It was too steep, too dangerous in the dark. They would have to go around. That gave the Americans minutes. They used every second, running, stumbling, helping each other through the darkness. They reached the valley pass 2 hours before dawn. The same pass where Marcus had started this whole battle. German engineers were still working to clear the destroyed tanks. Work lights illuminated the area. The Germans were making progress. But now the Americans could see something the Germans could not. All those burning supply trucks had done their job. The German tanks were immobilized. Not by damage, by lack of fuel. Crews stood around their tanks, looking confused. Radio operators tried to call for more supplies. But the supplies were gone, burned to ash. "We did it," Specs whispered. "We actually did it." The German battle group was stuck. No fuel to advance. No supplies to sustain a fight. They would have to either retreat or wait for resupply. Either way, the village was safe. For now, Marcus and his men crawled through the snow toward American lines. The wounded man had passed out from pain. Two others were injured. All were exhausted, but alive. They reached the village just as the sun rose. Lieutenant Crawford saw them coming. His face showed relief, then shock at their condition. "Medical!" Crawford shouted. "Get medics here now." The medics took the wounded. The others collapsed in the snow. Too tired to move, too cold to feel anything. Crawford knelt beside Marcus. "Did you do it?" Marcus nodded. He was too exhausted to speak. "The Germans are pulling back," Crawford said. "Our scouts report they're abandoning the valley, retreating east." Marcus closed his eyes. Mission accomplished. Against impossible odds, they had stopped a German armored column. Not with superior weapons, not with more men, just with courage, cunning, and a little bit of hunting knowledge from Montana. But the war was not over. This was just one battle in one valley. The Battle of the Bulge still raged across the Ardennes. Thousands more would die before it ended. For now, though, this village was safe. These soldiers were alive. That had to be enough. 3 days passed before American reinforcements arrived at Rocherath. The Battle of the Bulge still raged across Belgium and Luxembourg, but this sector was now secure. The German threat here had been eliminated. Marcus Webb sat outside a damaged barn, cleaning his rifle. His hands were bandaged from frostbite. His face was covered in cuts and bruises. But he was alive. They were all alive. That a convoy of American vehicles rolled into the village. Jeeps, trucks, and command cars. Officers stepped out, looking at the defensive positions with approval. Then they saw the valley pass beyond. "Dear God," one colonel whispered, the valley looked like a graveyard. 12 destroyed or abandoned German tanks sat among burned vehicles and scattered equipment. The snow was black with soot and oil. German bodies still lay where they had fallen, frozen in the winter cold. An intelligence officer approached Lieutenant Crawford. "Sir, can you explain what happened here?" Crawford pointed to Marcus. "Ask him." The intelligence officer was a captain named Morrison. He had a notebook and a skeptical expression. He had seen a lot in this war. He had heard many exaggerated stories. This looked like one of them. "Private Webb?" Morrison asked. "You're the gunner?" Marcus stood and saluted. "Yes, sir. Tell me what happened." "From the beginning." Marcus explained. The tank tracks they spotted. The column approaching at dawn. The single anti-tank gun. 7 tanks destroyed in 4 minutes. The desperate raid on German supplies. Morrison listened. His skepticism grew with every sentence. "You're telling me that one gun crew stopped an entire Panzer column?" "Yes, sir." 12 tanks?" "Yes, sir." "In 4 minutes?" "Give or take, sir." Morrison looked at Crawford. "Lieutenant, did you witness this?" "I was in the village, sir. But I saw the aftermath. And I saw Private Webb lead a suicide raid that destroyed German supplies. That part one can confirm." Morrison walked to the valley. He spent an hour examining the destroyed tanks. He took photographs. He measured distances. He interviewed other soldiers. When he returned, his skeptical expression was gone. The German tanks were destroyed by precise hits to weak points. Morrison said, "Turret rings, track assemblies, engine compartments." This wasn't lucky shooting. This was expert marksmanship. Private Webb grew up hunting in Montana, Crawford explained. He knows terrain and angles better than most trained artillery officers. Morrison wrote in his notebook. Then he looked at Marcus. "You understand what you did here, Private? You stopped a German breakthrough. Behind this village are 3 supply depots and a field hospital. If the Germans had gotten through, hundreds of Americans would have died or been captured. You saved them all." Marcus did not know what to say. He just nodded. "I'm recommending you for the Distinguished Service Cross." Morrison said, "That's the second highest medal for valor, just below the Medal of Honor." "Sir, I was just doing my job," Marcus said quietly. "No, son. Your job was to watch the road and report German activity. Instead, you stop an armored column with 1 gun and a lot of guts. That's way beyond the job description." Morrison left to file his report. The story spread quickly through American units. Soldiers started calling Marcus the Mountain Ghost because of how he appeared from nowhere and destroyed the German column before vanishing. The German report told a different story. It was captured a week later by American intelligence. Marcus got to read it through an interpreter. The German commander believed he had been ambushed by a concealed anti-tank company, maybe 20 guns positioned in prepared positions. He estimated American strength at 200 men. The precision of the shooting convinced him the Americans were using experimental ammunition with enhanced penetration. He never imagined it was 4 men with 1 gun. The colonel who interviewed Marcus asked the obvious question. How did you make those shots? The training manual says it's impossible to hit a tank's turret ring at 800 yards. Marcus thought about how to explain it, about watching elk move through mountains, about understanding how light changed angles, about his father's lessons in patience and observation. Sir, the manual teaches you to shoot at tanks. I learned to hunt. There's a difference. What difference? Hunting isn't about the gun. It's about knowing your target better than it knows itself. Understanding the environment, using terrain and timing and patience. That's what my father taught me. The colonel studied Marcus for a long moment. Then he smiled. Your father taught you well, private. A week later, the ceremony happened in a partially destroyed church. The whole unit assembled. General officers came from division headquarters. Medals were awarded. Speeches were given about courage and sacrifice. Marcus stood at attention while a general pinned the Distinguished Service Cross to his uniform. It felt heavy, heavier than any rifle. You're a hero, son, the general said. But Marcus did not feel like a hero. He felt like a survivor. He thought about the German soldiers who died in that valley. They were somebody's sons too, somebody's fathers and brothers. War did not have heroes. It just had people trying to survive. That evening, Marcus wrote a letter home to his father. He did not mention the medals. He did not mention the German tanks or the raids or any of it. Instead, he wrote something simpler. Dad, remember when you said hunting wasn't about killing? It was about respect and understanding? You were right. That lesson saved lives here, mine and others. Thank you for teaching me, not just how to shoot, but how to think, how to read the land, how to be patient. Those skills mattered more than any military training ever could. I hope the war ends soon so I can come home and hunt with you again. Real hunting, in the mountains, where nobody dies. I miss that. I miss you. Your son, Marcus. He sealed the letter and gave it to the mail clerk. Then he cleaned his rifle again. The war was not over. The Battle of the Bulge would rage for another month. More fighting, more dying. But this battle was won. Years later, historians would study the Battle of the Bulge. They would analyze every major engagement. Most would never hear about Rorschach, about 4 men in a foxhole who changed the course of a battle through improvisation and impossible odds. But the soldiers who were there never forgot. They told their children and grandchildren about the mountain ghost, about the gunner who fought like a hunter, about the day when skill and courage defeated overwhelming force. That was enough. More than enough.